Hi guys, welcome back. This is What Would Henry Grow, and today, as promised, I am going to be doing some propagating. Now, propagating literally just means to create new plants, and there are different ways that you can do that. So we've got a couple of ways that we can propagate plants, and it really depends on what plant you have. Also, general preference once you get to know the different methods. Certain plants will only be able to be propagated in one way or another, whereas there are other plants where you can be a bit more picky. So we've got main types are probably going to be water propagation, soil propagation. You've also got separation, you've also got layering, you can graft, and you can pollinate. So we will be covering all of these. I'm going to cover a couple of these today in this video, and I will take some more time to do some other ones. Now today I'm going to be focusing mainly on water propagation. This is my favourite way to do it. I like to water propagate mainly because I enjoy seeing the roots. I enjoy being able to see the progress of the plant and seeing where it comes from. So in this method, what you would do is you would take a plant, you would take a cutting of that plant, you would cut it in a specific area, and then you would just put it in some water. You change the water about once a week, whenever you see it get a bit dirty, and after a little while roots will come, you'll get some new leafy development on the top, and it will basically give you a whole new plant from one bit of other plant, essentially. So I've got a couple of plants here to show you. I've even got some plants to propagate as well. I want to go through a couple. So I've got this big Schefflera behind me. This is an umbrella tree. I've just slapped it quite aggressively, I don't know why. And I have already propagated from this. Now I'm not going to be propagating from it today. I only really took some cuttings because it was quite large and it was getting a bit leany to one side. So I chopped off the top. I've got some bamboo in there, as you can see. There's one bit there, and I've got a couple more bits. And that is just to help stabilise it. It's quite a large thing. It's definitely about 5 foot now, so it's quite easy. Now, all I did was I took some cuttings, and I then just popped them in some water. Now, what I actually did when I initially took the cutting, I take one of these out of the water. This one's already getting quite a lot of root growth here. So the good thing about Scheffleras is they're very, very easy to find a leaf node. Now a leaf node is just here where you would see your leaf come out. Let's wait for that to focus. So that's where you see your leaf begin to come out. The good thing about Scheffleras is they are incredibly nodey, and as you can see, they tend to root quite easily. Now, this is very beneficial, but it means that you have to be careful how high you put your water in. So I had to put my water in quite high because I had another cutting which I have actually transplanted into a pot, which was rather small, and this meant that I had to put the water quite high, so I've got quite high root development. Now what I can do is I can cut it there to where the lowest root is, which will make the initial plant shorter, but it will make it much easier to pot up, or I'll just reduce the amount of water that's currently in the glass, and that will encourage lower roots to go through as well. So another thing about a Schefflera is it's got rather large leaves, or large in the propagation world. This means that if you keep the leaves to the size that they are, it will take quite a lot of energy for the plant to get all of the sunlight and photosynthesis from the tip all the way up and down the stem into where the roots are going to produce. So what I did was I just cut them. I just did a little cut in half, so it still have enough leaf and enough green there to photosynthesize, but it wouldn't take quite as much energy to get down the plant. So what you'll find with propagation is you can have a situation where it's one or the other. Now this particular one I have is very, very lacking in the root department. It's not even attached. I have a bit of loose root there, but there is no actual root growth on this. What it has got, however, is a lot of new leaf growth. Now the rule with propagation is there's no real time frame for things to grow roots. Sometimes it takes a couple of days, a couple of weeks, sometimes it can take months and months. Again, the length of your cutting will depend on how quickly it will take for roots to develop. But as long as you're seeing your old and current leaves staying green and healthy, then you're more or less guaranteed that the plant isn't going to die. It's just taking its sweet time to get some new roots. So here is the Schefflera that I potted from my cuttings in my glass. This is in still a very small pot, but as you can see, let me move it down there. As you can see, we've already got some roots coming out along the bottom of the pot here, which means that at some point in the near future, I will definitely need to repot this. Now, all I did when transplanting it from water into soil was I quite literally just filled a pot up with soil, poked a hole in there, and I dumped it in, and then I covered it. That's because I've rooted Scheffleras before. Now I know that they're not particularly fussy when it comes to rooting. The one drawback that I do find you have with water propagation specifically is you tend to shock certain plants' roots when you transplant it in from water to soil. Now you can get around the issues of your roots becoming shocked when you transplant them into soil. One way to do that is to gradually just introduce the soil into your pot or into your glass with water, and then you just slowly sort of level down the amount of water you put in, and you increase the amount of soil until it's eventually just full of soil and you've got yourself a plant. But it is really just trial and error. There are some plants that can take it quite easily and other plants that can't. You'll also find that humidity will play a factor in it. Now, all I do with my cuttings when I root them, the majority of them all go into one place, and they all go into a place where they get direct, just a tiny little bit of direct sunlight, but mostly indirect sunlight. They then can just chill, do their own thing. They get enough sunlight sort of to photosynthesize. The indirect sunlight still has that photosynthesizing ability anyway, so they still get enough energy, and then they can grow their roots as they want. The most important thing to do is to remember to change your water regularly. That's a definite problem if you get yourself on a regular schedule with watering. I tend to use a Sunday as a watering day, and I use that opportunity to prune certain plants to make sure that there's no diseases or pests or anything that I need to get on top of, and it sort of is a nice little time to set aside for myself. Now I have probably over 100 plants, so I need quite a lot of time. Obviously not everybody will be quite as obsessive as I am, so some plants don't need watering every week, some plants need watering more than once a week, so it really is about what plants you have and then sort of switching up your schedule. There are a number of journals and things like that you can buy online which help you to mark down your schedule. I for one just put it down in my phone calendar, and it sends me a little sort of jingle whenever I need to go and water something, and it helps me to stay on top of things. But today we are going to be taking some fresh cuttings of my Philodendron. This is pretty much over 5 feet again. It's quite a large plant. I've just temporarily hooked it onto my stairs there. It's quite a long plant. Now, it grows ridiculously fast, and I basically have to prune it continuously to make sure that I don't get overrun with trailing vines everywhere. So what we're going to do today is we are going to take cuttings of the longer ones. I think we're going to stay up to about, if we look at the whole plant's length, we'll stay up to about here. We'll cut anything that's more or less longer than this. That gives us 3 or 4 vines there to play with down there. And then that will keep it nice and trim. It will also encourage it to get bushier up top. Now where you've pruned it, it will tend to split, and it will give you 2 vines instead of just the 1, and that will increase the amount of foliage you have, make it look much more full and happy. So all you're going to need to do this is going to be a sterilised pair of gardening shears. You can use clippers, pruners. I, for the longest time, was just using a pair of kitchen scissors that I disinfected. As long as it's sharp and can give you one clean cut, that's basically all you need. It doesn't need to be any fancy gardening stuff. If you're not super into gardening just yet, you don't need to go all out and buy yourself a whole kit. You'll find that more tools will be more valuable to you than others, so if you just wait and find out what you'll need more often than not, you can sort of tailor your own shopping needs, and it won't be too expensive for you either. So all we'll do is I just get some isopropyl alcohol, put it on a cotton ball, and I wipe down on the blades. So it's just to make sure that no diseases transfer from other plants, because it's going to be a new cutting. You're going to be trying to encourage root growth, so you're going to want it to be as clean and sterile as possible. So all you'll need is your pair of clippers or scissors and a clean glass of water, and that's pretty much it. So I'm going to take a cutting by a leaf node. This plant is actually long enough that I can just take it off like here without detaching it. So the good thing about philodendrons is they already have aerial roots. This is because they can be climbers or they can be trailers, this particular heartleaf philodendron. So it's going to be really easy to root these. I find myself constantly getting cuttings off of these. It's really, really easy. I will just take a cutting. I tend to cut just above a leaf node to make it easier for the plant to split. However, you can cut just below, you can cut wherever you want. If you want to cut in the middle of the vine, you can cut literally anywhere on here, it's fine. It's not going to damage the actual mother plant, it's going to be fine. The only issue is if you cut in the middle here, there's nothing going to be going on here. So you're just going to have a bit of dead vine. So I'll generally tend to cut as close here as possible, just to make sure that it looks as neat as possible. So now the plant is much shorter, as you can now see. It's a lot neater, and this will get a lot bushier. I've just happened to turn it on the one empty side that it has, but that's my own fault. So this will get a lot bushier and it will become a lot more full. The thing about trailing plants is they do become very knotted very easily, so it's good to take a couple of moments out of each sort of week or so just to make sure it's untangled and to make sure that they can grow freely. It's basically just a bit of a bother to untangle them all and make sure that it looks nice and full all around. And if you don't, you end up with nice gaps in your pot like mine. Luckily, it's a lovely purple, so I don't mind too much. From this cutting, we've got 6 vines now, and this is going to make a really decent amount of plants. For each cutting, all we are going to need is going to be 2 leaf nodes. So that's going to be essentially just that to make 1 plant. As long as there's a leaf on one of them, that's all that matters. Now it will need to be the top one because you don't need leaves on the bottom one where the roots are going to grow. So all we'll do is we will start with detangling our 6, I've just dropped one on the floor, detangling our 6 cuttings. Now, it's important to get the right direction of growth. I've read on the internet that it's going to be the direction that your aerial roots grow in, but I've had my philodendron for about 2 years and its aerial roots grow in whatever direction they bloody well want. So I find it's always important to remember what direction the plant is growing in, and that will be your bottom. So in this instance, from where I've cut, I've still got all of this stalk. That's essentially useless to us now. So I'll cut that. That is waste, it will go in the compost. And then I will cut just above this second leaf here. So once I show you when it's all done, you're essentially just left with that. Now, this is the top and this is the bottom. So we'll get rid of this little bit of fuzz. And we'll get rid of the leaf, just like that. Just pull it off gently. I've tried cutting it, but I find you don't get to cut it quite as close to the actual vine and you leave a little nub, whereas if you pull it you tend to get a much better and cleaner cut. So this is one cutting. You'll get your photosynthesis from this leaf up here, and the roots with all the hormones from where the leaf had developed will all be built in here, and they will essentially just grow out your aerial roots and they will become proper roots. And I will do this with all of my cuttings that I have, or all of the vines that I have cut off here, and then I will show you what I do with them. So what you should be left with is going to be about 1 or 2 glasses full of cuttings. Now, one thing I do want to mention is as you're going to be taking cuttings from the tips of plants, you're going to find that some of them will have new growth on there. Now what I like to do is I like to take the new growth, I take one leaf that's already at least a little bit developed and fully out and able to photosynthesize to give it a bit of a running chance. Now this does mean that there's a lot of energy needing to go into this extra stalk, but rather than cut off the new growth and force it to grow new growth anyway, I always try and leave it on there and see how it gets on. So all I'll do is I'll fill it up with water, like I've done with this one. I'll fill this one up with water, and then I will just put them somewhere where they get a lot of bright indirect light, and in a couple of weeks or a couple of months now, depending on your plant, with philodendrons, I find it happens incredibly quickly. Within a good couple of weeks, you get a nice gathering of roots like this. Now let me find a good one to show you here, where they've just developed out. Here we go. So you can see here that it's got its nice long tap roots, and it's already starting to develop some of the more tiny, intricate spiderwebby ones, which will go through all the soil. Now these have come all from the aerial roots that have already been developing on the side of the plant. With other plants, it's not going to be quite as easy. I find my rule is, if it has leaf nodes, if it gets sort of many different leaves on one stalk, I will try and propagate it via water. A good way to check is always just to Google. If you just Google the name of the plant and propagation, it will give you some sort of a WikiHow or whatever about the best way to propagate it, and that typically will be the most common way that it's propagated. If you can propagate it by water, chances are you can propagate it by soil. There are certain plants that will not take that. I have a Calathea, which doesn't propagate in water. It's just sort of one leaf comes out of one stalk and that's it, and it's propagated via separation. Now, I will cover separation in another video. I don't have any dirt on me right now to be able to show you all the different ways that you can propagate via soil, etc. But there is another way of propagation I want to show you just a little bit later. The reason we do try and create new plants is it's not just beneficial for the mother plant, it also is beneficial for you. It gives you a load of new free plants with minimal effort. You've essentially just taken a little piece from one and cloned a load of little babies. As long as you're taking it from a healthy plant that has no problems, you're going to create healthy plants that have very little problems, you know, aside from pests and things like that and shocking the actual plant's roots. When you're transplanting it into soil, there's very little that can go wrong. If you're keeping the mother plant alive, there's a good chance you can keep the baby alive. A lot of problems I find having propagating is that the temperature is a bit of an issue, especially in my house. It's quite drafty. I have a cat, so I have to leave one of the windows open so he can come in and out, and it means that it gets quite drafty, especially in winter. So I will get just a freezer bag, you know, things to put food in the freezer. I'll take one of those. They're clear. You'll find they're either they're very transparent. They're either a blue hue or see-through entirely. And I will just blow into it and create a nice little air bubble, put the plant inside of it and tie a knot to give it its own little greenhouse. That gives it its own little atmosphere, and it gives it a bit more humidity, which gives the plant a fighting chance. So if you're having issues with propagating and you find, you know, they're struggling along, just try and put it in a place where it gets a bit more humidity, and see if that helps at all, because that has helped a lot of mine. When I propagate via soil, I have a lot less success, I find, than when I do it with water. So I tend to use the little miniature greenhouse method of just popping a freezer bag in there, or popping it in a freezer bag. There you go. So because I am a very curious person, I will tend to take whatever I have in terms of plants, and I will try and propagate from there. So I have here 2 strands of my chain of hearts. They are very cute, they're very ornate, and they're a little bit fiddly. I find if you don't like plants getting knotted, you will not like these plants. They get incredibly knotted. It's just they're behind me. I have piled it all on top of the pot, and I've let the rest of it just dangle out just to make it a little bit fuller, because they are very sort of delicate and small. They can look straggly quite easily. I bought mine online, and by the time it came around, it was a little bit stressed out, so it lost a few leaves. So where it's lost the leaves, now it's getting a bit more growth. I've just cut down where it's had a bit of a naked patch, and I've just wanted to see if I could propagate it via water, and I'm having quite a lot of success. You can barely tell, but let's pop it against the black of my dress there. You could barely tell, but I'm just getting some little baby roots there. What I do with mine is I will wait until the roots get substantial enough, or until there's a nice bunching of new growth on the top, or in this case the bottom of the plant, and then I will put it in either a new pot, or if it's a trailing plant and I find the trailing plant isn't full enough, I can just put it straight back in the mother plant, and that makes the actual mother plant look fuller, gives you more vines to cut from in the future as well. So it's up to you. Because I've only got 2, my general rule for trailing plants is 3. If I had 3 of these little vines, I would make a new plant, but because I've just got the 2, I'm probably going to pop it back into the mother plant and make it look a little bit more full and a little bit more impressive as well. I will need to repot that at some point, so it will definitely feature again in a video. So the reason that water propagation works is because you provide the water that the plant needs and it gets the sunlight that it needs, and that's the basics that every plant will need to photosynthesize. There are certain plants that this don't work on. Now, there's a certain entire grouping of plants that this won't really successfully work on, and these are going to be succulents. The reason for this is succulents are plants with, like aloe vera, whose leaves are incredibly big and they're used to store water. So I have here a Kalanchoe, and they are a succulent. Now, they're a bit of a weird succulent. They're not sort of the normal succulent anyway. They have a dormancy period, which is a little bit different to most succulents, and they're very interesting anyway. I will feature a whole video on succulents, cacti and things like that, because I do think they are fantastic. Now, the reason that water propagation isn't the most successful thing for them, I've never really had success with it. I do know somebody that managed to root some aloe vera, so the jury's out in terms of my experience with them. The reason that they're so difficult to propagate with water is because they've stored all of the water that they need in their leaves. So the thing about succulents and propagating from succulents is you literally just need 1 leaf of theirs. And all you need to do with that is you just leave it in one area, flat, on a plate, or some people put it on a tray, some people just leave it on the table. I have accidentally rooted my Kalanchoe just by picking off a leaf and leaving it in the soil beneath, and in the time that I didn't water it, it basically created a new little baby. So what happens is it develops some roots and it takes all of the nutrients that it needs from the main plant that's been broken off from the mother, takes all of the nutrients out of this plant, and it creates a whole new plant. And then you get a little root system as well. Ooh, there we go, you get a little root system as well. And then once this entire plant is spent, which it very nearly is, it's not quite done yet. Once this entire plant is spent, this will then be a completely independent plant and will need soil and will need all of the rest of the requirements that a normal succulent plant will need. So it's incredibly easy. If you have any sort of a succulent plant at home, whether it's an Echeveria or a cactus, in fact, will also propagate in the exact same way. You have to be a bit more careful with cacti though. You just literally take a good healthy looking leaf, and I tend to just pull them off. I think that they don't need to, oh, that one's not very good. I don't think that they need to be cut off at all. You basically just pull it off right as close to the base as you can go. There we go, just like that. And I'm going to put it on this shelf here, just facing out, and hopefully we're going to get another plant, just like this little baby here. So what I'll do, when this is just in probably a couple of weeks' time, it will be ready to get potted into its own little pot, and I have 1,000,000,001 pots of the perfect size for new little baby cuttings. And then we'll have another little succulent. So that was water propagation and that was succulent propagation. I will go into any more detail that you might need. I will cover any questions that you have in another video in the future, because the next one is probably going to be another propagation video covering other types. There are ones that I will not touch on in extreme detail, like grafting, just purely because it's not a venture that I've sort of done yet, and if I'm going to do that, I'd rather sort of start it from the beginning and a new adventure that I can sort of document from the get-go. I'm not going to try and sort of claim any intelligence or any knowledge where I don't have it, and I'm quite happy to tell you all that I'm in no way an expert. But I will say that my problem plant this week has been the fern. I discovered some, if you have a look on my channel, you'll actually see it's the header on my channel. I discovered what I thought were little eggs on the underside of one of my ferns, and in a panic I cut it off. Having looked at it a little bit more, I saw how uniform they were, and I did a bit of Googling, and I discovered that I essentially castrated my fern. That's how they produce babies. So they don't have flowers, so they produce via spores. and they have different leaves which develop different things on the underside of them, and the spores release when it's wet enough, and it actually just sort of reproduces. And I, in my panic, decided to act first and research later, and my poor fern, I chopped his bits off. So I would say it's been my problem because I have realised just how little I know about ferns as a whole. It's not an issue anymore. I have a humidity issue. So I had a bit of a problem where my ferns were all dying. I didn't realise why until it was nearly too late. I have a maidenhair, just a common Korean rock fern, and they are thankfully doing well now. I will go and get them from upstairs and just give you a quick show of them just to see that they are improving. I promise I don't kill all ferns. But humidity is definitely going to be a big issue for me. But that's it for this episode. I really do hope that you learned something, you enjoy it. If you have any questions, please do send a comment, send a question, whatever you want to do. And send me any pictures that you might have of your propagation progress. I would love to show them in the next video, if you would allow me. And have a great rest of your day. Thanks a lot. Bye.